Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to do something a little different. We're putting on our consultant hats. Yeah, we're stepping right into the shoes of a top management consultant to crack a super high-stakes business problem. And this one's a classic, pulled straight from the pages of the legendary consulting guide, Case in Point.
Okay, so here's the mission. Your client, and get this, it's Walmart, just dropped a cool $100 million on a website. Now they've hired us to tell them if that was a smart investment or a total flop. So today, we're going to break this thing down just like the top firms would, taking this massive, complex problem and turning it into a clear, solvable case. So here's our plan of attack. First, we'll define what this $100 million problem actually is. Then we'll jump into the numbers, sizing the revenue, figuring out the payback period, and the ROI. From there, we'll deliver our final verdict on the Voodoo.com deal, and we'll wrap it all up with the big picture consultant's takeaway. Ready? Let's dive in.
All right, first things first, we have to define the problem. Before you can even think about a solution, you have to get crystal clear on the client's situation. What are the facts on the ground? And what's the real question they need us to answer?
Right, so listen to this. The deal is already done. This isn't one of those, hey, should we buy this company cases? Nope. This is we just wrote a check for $100 million. Uh-oh, was that a huge mistake kind of situation? Walmart bought Voodoo.com to get a foothold in the digital movie game, and now they need our analysis to justify that price tag and, figure out what to do next.
Now this is where it gets really interesting. Take a look at the competitive landscape here, because this is crucial. Apple is the absolute behemoth, the king of the hill with almost 2/3 of the entire market. And Walmart, they look like a tiny little speck at just over 5%. But, and this is the key insight, you got to look closer, check out the change in market share. Walmart is growing way faster than anyone else on this chart. I mean, by a long shot. So yeah, they're small, but they're the challenger with all the momentum. And maybe, just maybe, that helps explain that big price tag.
Okay, pro tip from the consulting world, always clarify the deliverables. You need to know exactly what the client expects. And in this case, they've been super clear. They gave us 4 key questions they need answered. We need to figure out the annual revenues, calculate the payback period and the first-year ROI, and then answer the big one, should they even keep this Voodoo.com site? Our entire analysis is going to be built around answering these 4 points directly. All right, time to get our hands dirty with some numbers. First up, sizing the revenue. See, a consultant never just guesses. You build a logical framework. We're going to use a core consulting principle here called MEIS. It's a fancy acronym that just means we're going to break the problem down in a way that covers all the bases without any overlap. It's just a super logical way to think.
And this is what that looks like in practice. This is our logic tree. To calculate Walmart's total revenue, this big, scary, unknown number, we just need to figure out 3 smaller, more manageable pieces. First, how many movies are downloaded in the entire US? Second, what's Walmart's slice of that pie? And third, what's the average price they charge for a download? By breaking the problem down this way, we create a clear path to the answer. So in a real case interview, this is a make or break moment. You've just laid out your smart logical structure, now you need the data. This is where you'd turn to the client, or the interviewer, and ask these clarifying questions. Okay, what does the industry data say about the total market size? And what's your internal data on the average price per download? Getting these inputs is absolutely critical to moving forward. And here's how that logic tree becomes a really practical tool. We can immediately plug in what we know, like that 5.3% market share. And what's so powerful about this is that it instantly shows us the 2 missing pieces of the puzzle, the total market size and the average price. This is how a consultant turns a big, ambiguous question into a clear, solvable calculation.
Okay, so we have a plan for revenue, but revenue is only half the story, right? Now we get to the real question. Was this investment worth it? And to do that, we need to move beyond just the top-line number and start calculating profitability, starting with the payback period and ROI.
First up is the payback period. The client really wants to know how long until we make our $100 million back. This is a fundamental measure of risk. But notice the key variable in the formula is annual profit. That means before we can do anything else, we have to figure out the cost side of the equation. And profit is simply revenue minus costs. But a top consultant doesn't just list out costs randomly. They structure them. We'd create buckets for the major expenses, things like licensing fees to the movie studios, the tech and maintenance for the site, marketing and customer acquisition, and of course, all that data storage and bandwidth. And each of these is its own little deep dive.
For example, to estimate marketing costs, you'd need to analyze the customer acquisition cost, or CAC, for a similar digital service. Next up, the client wants the first-year ROI. Now, think of this as a snapshot of immediate performance. It answers a really simple question. For every single dollar we invested, how much profit did we get back in year one? It's a critical measure of the investment's initial efficiency. All right, with our financial framework in place, we can now tackle the final question. This is where we really earn our consulting fee. After all the analysis, what's the strategic verdict? Should Walmart keep Vudu.com? And this is the moment we have to shift gears. We have to go from being a number cruncher to a true strategic advisor. The answer isn't just going to be sitting there in a spreadsheet. We have to evaluate if this $100 million acquisition actually aligns with Walmart's broader strategy, its brand, and its long-term goals. A strong recommendation always weighs the pros and cons. The pros are pretty clear. Vudu gives Walmart an instant digital footprint, tons of valuable consumer data, and a way to compete with Amazon and Apple. But the cons are significant. Does a premium service like Vudu really fit with the Walmart brand of everyday low prices? And more importantly, can a retail giant truly compete on tech with Silicon Valley? A consultant would argue that the strategic risk of confusing the brand and getting into a tech war they can't win, well, that might just outweigh the benefits. So, the final step is synthesis. You take the numbers, the strategic pros, the cons, and you boil it all down into one clear, actionable recommendation. This is that final slide a consultant would present to the CEO, answering the core question directly. Okay, so let's zoom out. We've walked through the framework for cracking this case, but what's the big picture lesson here? What can we take away from this structured approach to problem solving? This case was never really just about Walmart. It's a masterclass in structured problem solving. This is the repeatable method consultants use. First, you deconstruct the problem. Break big questions into smaller, logical pieces. Second, you scaffold your logic. Build a clear framework before you go searching for numbers. Third, you balance the hard quantitative data with the softer qualitative strategic judgment. And finally, you always end with a clear so what, a direct recommendation. That is the core of the consultant's toolkit. Ultimately, this framework isn't just for consultants solving $100 million problems. It's a powerful tool for anyone looking to bring clarity and logic to a complex challenge, whether that's in business, in school, or just in your personal life. So the question I want to leave you with is, what's your next $100 million question, and how will you structure your attack? Thanks for watching.